Your ears do not deceive you. You have just entered the Cryptid Creator Corner, brought to you by your friends at Comic Book Yeti. So without further ado, let's get on to the interview.
Hello and welcome to Comic Book Yeti's Cryptid Creator Corner. I am one of your hosts, Jimmy Gasparo, and I am very excited that I have a returning guest to the podcast, and also someone that I've had the pleasure of meeting in person at my favorite Comic-Con, Baltimore Comic-Con. And you will probably recognize some of their works that I've enjoyed, such as Stray Dogs, Feral, Local Man with Tim Seeley, Army of Darkness Forever, and Uncanny Valley, which I want to talk about as well. He also has a new series, The Thing, coming out with Marvel, that's going to be out in May, and super excited to talk to today's guest, Tony Fleece. Tony, welcome to the podcast, or welcome back to the podcast.
Jimmy, happy to be back. Last time I was here, I was in the wilderness of Maryland. I was at my aunt and uncle's place in Elkton, and their internet is so. Listen, their place is so beautiful that it doesn't even matter to me that their internet's so shitty. But I felt like I was contacting you from like a dial-up internet in 1995.
I really was worried that the video, I mean, the audio turned out okay.
Yeah.
But I don't think we ever used the video because it looked like a found footage, like horror film.
Yeah, like the Blair Witch Project.
Yeah, a little bit. Justin Greenwood, who started off with you doing the art on Army of Darkness Forever. Yeah, Justin was on as well. So I'm glad to have you back. Some of the all the stuff that you've been working on. I mean, I was a big fan of Stray Dogs, and that is something I think, like, right off the bat is kind of a tough premise to sell, especially because Trisha's art is so kind of like adorable at times, and you're like, oh, we're gonna take these dogs, and this is going to be heart wrenching. And then you follow it up with something like Feral at Image Comics, which, for listeners who, aren't familiar with it, I mean, I think it was the first tagline I saw for it, or like kind of elevator pitch idea, was the Walking Dead meets the Aristocats, which, for my money, very underrated Disney film.
Sure, yeah. Jazzy, sassy, cute kittens and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. I really love that one. So yeah, I mean, I want to kind of start there with Feral, because I know since you've been on, and in September, I think it was September and into October, you kind of did a Feral world tour.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of want to hear how that went. What was that like, getting out to like comic shops?
Well, so first of all, the Stray Dogs, it sounds like a hard premise to pitch to people, but it actually is, out of all of them, the easiest one. Like, out of all my
really?
comics, yeah, it's the easiest pitch. It's the easiest sale. When I'm at conventions, when I tell people the premise of it, there's a part when I'm explaining it to them that they just go like, "Oh, I'll take that," So
Yeah. Oh, I mean, it's fantastic. To me, it just seems like when you have, anytime we have like dogs, and they're in a pack, and it's, there's maybe it's because I'm a dog person. There's such like a connection.
What you're saying is that when everyone asks, "But does anything happen to the dogs?" Right?
Yeah,
That
exactly.
that is a difficult part of the pitch, and sometimes you will lose people there. But I just sort of lean on the idea that, like, well, everything we love has, like, the reason why that hurts us so much is because we fall in love with these characters, and that's sort of what we do in the book, and what we're doing in Feral is like building up these characters, and a little bit of it is cheating because they're so cute and they're so helpless, and you just want to see them survive. But yeah, there are some people that they're just like, if anything happens to the dog, I can't handle it. Although I do think some of them are faking. It's like people that say they're terrified of clowns. Like, some people are terrified of clowns, but some people just say that because, it's like that, like people that don't like the word moist or whatever. It's like, all right, not everybody that says that really has a physical reaction to the word moist.
No, that's probably right.
That's at least been my experience in selling this book. Over the past, it's been out for 4 years now. I keep getting these Facebook anniversary reminders of like, here's when Stray Dogs came out, and it's 4 years ago. It's crazy.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
But
I
for
I I still remember when when I first heard of it, and, like, this I think I got one of the variant covers that Image did, but I was just so struck by it, and I had that, "Ooh, this is gonna be, a little rough," but, I did. I fell in love with the characters because, 1, I love dogs, so that's an easy
sure,
kind of thing right there, but
same.
also with your writing, Trisha's artwork, you really do imbue so much personality, like, into these dogs without it being to the point of, cartoony or or caricature, So,
Well,
yeah.
that's sort of like why we wanted to keep doing it. Why we wanted to go on and make Feral was that we felt like we sort of had. It's not like we invented this, like like we
Yeah.
three is basically the same format as this. It's so much from the animals' perspectives that we never have people. We never have, like if people are in it, they're like like a large truck moving around or like a tree or something. Like it's not that big a deal to these animals. They're definitely not talking to them. And that's sort of how you lock into these animals perspective, at least how we work it. And I feel like that really works for the stories that we tell. That like the people reading our books, um, they meet these characters, and we don't give them anywhere else to go. Like you're just in this story with these characters, and um, and you sort of start to see through their eyes, like the low to the ground perspective that they see, just being smaller than us, but also what makes them different from us. So like things that they can do that we can't do, or things that like the thing we always said with Stray Dogs is like any person could get out of this situation easily by just opening a door, but these dogs, they can't do that. And so that was what made us want to come back and do Feral, was that just like we loved working in this sort of niche that we had sort of carved out for ourselves, this sort of like creepy, cute, but very sincere, and like we're never it's not a joke, and we're never like, we're never winking at anybody. Like
Yeah.
this is just a story that looks like this, and you should feel the way you felt when you would watch The Secret of Nim, or like those movies where you're a little bit uneasy because it doesn't feel as safe as, say, like Aladdin, or even The Lion King was, Mufasa got thrown off that rock, or Bambi's mom
Yeah.
gets gets shot in the woods.
Yeah, I
You
mean,
never feel
that
100% safe in those movies.
right. That sense of unease or things aren't safe, yeah, because it's true though, I've read Stray Dogs and, there's never a sense of any, like, winking,
Yeah,
at the, at the reader, at the audience. It's played very, sincere. It feels like they're such adorable characters, but it feels like there are absolutely 100% real stakes to it,
yeah.
which is really what keeps you, coming back. So,
Yeah, that's the trick we're trying to to play over and
yeah,
over, in an ongoing series now, is like coming up, like we have a map for what the whole thing is, but I've been telling people it's like a little more improvisational. Like we have it planned out a few arcs, but there's room for us to, have an idea and go off in directions. And whereas Stray Dogs was like very tightly mapped out, Feral is like, oh, this would be an interesting, the last arc we did, the cat lady arc, the our cats end up getting thrown into like this hoarder house full of cats, and it's a crazy cat lady's house, and sort of like what makes those cats in that house different from like the cats we're meeting in the next arc, who have like a whole different history and a whole different scenario. They're basically the same animal, but they just by the way of like how they were treated by their people, or where they came from. How does it make their scenarios different? I don't know. We're having a lot of fun coming up with different threats and different scenarios to throw the cats in, and sort of playing with the idea of like zombie tropes, where uh, you have them we had them getting chased by, men in yellow suits like the crazies, and we had them,
Okay, yeah.
they're about to get shacked up in a Petco for an arc or two. So we get to do our Dawn of the Dead. Like it's just getting to sort of like play with these ideas of the classic zombie. Uh,
Right.
I don't want yeah, like zombie literature, like our great zombie stories, and go
Oh,
and
yeah.
play with those ideas, but tell them through a cat's perspective.
Dawn of the Dead, I feel like that's one of my favorites. I love both the original, George Romero Dawn of the Dead, and I really enjoy the remake that they did
Yep.
as well.
Same.
Both of them. That idea of being, you know, uh, trapped in a mall and trying to defend it, trying to use the resources at the mall, like all those aspects of it, I feel really make for a great film. And yeah, to kind of see that's where the Feral is headed. I think I have written down here, issue 11 will be out March 26th, and then issue 12 at the end of April 30th. So,
Yeah.
and it's 12 is the end of that second arc.
No, 10. The trade for volume 2 will be out also early March. That'll be out in the next couple of weeks. And then the next issue comes out right after that.
Oh wow.
So yeah, we're not letting up. We
No.
fell behind a couple weeks around issue 9, but we've caught up now, and we sort of, when we were on this tour. So you asked about the tour.
Yeah.
When we were on this tour, we didn't really take into account how hard it was going to be to drive across the country and still make the comic while we were doing that. And so we had to push back a couple weeks. But yeah, the first arc had wrapped up, and it came out. The 5th issue came out right around Comic-Con time, and then the first trade was coming out in September. And so we just decided, well, let's really get behind it and promote it. It was basically like that trade was coming out, Army of Darkness Forever Volume 1 was coming out, and Local Man was wrapping up, and that trade was coming out. So we're just like, this is a time when there's a lot of big things, coming out from my, like, that are my creator owned books, and some licensed stuff. I think
Yeah.
Wolverine was still coming out at that time. And I had finished drawing Local Man, and so I was just like, well, I'm going to have all this extra time. Let's use up all of that and go drive across the country. And sort of, we had scheduled a CGC signing in Florida for Feral, where it was me and Trish and Tone Rodriguez, who are the co-artists on Feral. And so we said, well, instead of flying down to CGC, what if we just drove down there, and then along the way hit comic stores, and then on the way back we could drive up the East Coast, and then come back through the Midwest. And so we sort of planned out this route, and then just sort of without too much thinking. And we planned a little bit. We made T-shirts, and we did like a tour variant that you could only get at tour stops, and we sort of, we wanted to make it a big deal, and we just went and hit as many of these shops as we could. We ended up, like, officially, I think we did like 45 shops, but with counting like pop-ins, and because when we get to a town that we hadn't been to before, which was, most of them, we would Google, what are the comic stores here, and we would go hit all the other ones too, and just say, hey, we're in town for this thing, and drop off posters for them and sign any books they had laying around. So we hit, over 50 comic shops.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was a real trial. It started off like, it's a fun road trip, and then 7 weeks in, we're just like, Tone Rodriguez, who's one of my best friends and who works on this book with me, and I were just basically in my car for 7 straight weeks, and staying in Econo lodges and Best Westerns. So
When you
we were,
mapped it out, did you had a, like, I assume you at least had a plan for the shops you were stopping
yeah,
at, like contacted them in advance, like set it all up and did that. And
yeah,
then you would also check out what other shops were in the area and hit those too.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah. It was so. I mean, comics are so weird right now, and like, I sort of had. We wrapped up Local Man because the sales just kept sort of sliding downwards, and it was hugely like beloved by people who read it, and we got nominated for the Eisner, and it got great
Yeah, I
reviews. And
it's great.
thank you.
Yeah.
But it's the like that book doing what it did sales wise really sort of shook me up when it came to Feral, because I sort of had this idea of like Feral being uh, like Stray Dogs was this shock surprise hit, and so
Yeah.
Feral's like this. If we can do it right, we were hoping to do it for like 60 issues and have this be like the little, the baby. This is our crown jewel. This is the one that pays the bills for a while.
Yeah,
And
sure.
so we didn't want anything to happen to the baby. and so, and so and the sales are good on it, but when we had this opportunity to go promote it and sort of like go face to face with these shops, the ones that we knew, and then meet new shops, it was sort of like, this seems like a better idea than just like whatever tweeting about it, or I already do as many interviews and podcasts, and like I'm pretty this will be the best one, but I do a lot of these. And so
Well, thank you. I
I've,
appreciate that.
I've tried everything, but what I found is probably the best way is just getting out there, making face to face with these retailers, and just tell them, like, because it's hard to read a solicit in previews or in the image catalog or whatever, and wrap your head around the idea that like this can be the new, this can be one that gets people to come back in the shop every month, like
Right.
Saga did, or like Buffy did before that, or like,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's just about trying to prop up that book, and basically I feel like we did pretty good. I don't know. We'll see a year from now if I'm just like, it was all none of it was worth it. It was a huge mistake.
Well, did you find like when you would do signings, like both the retailers at the shops as well as the customers, were they excited? Were they receptive?
Yeah.
How did you find most of the folks that you met along the way?
I mean, every shop's different. And so that was really part of the lesson, was just like, um, different shops have different like cultures, and different sort of like the way they interact with their fans. There were some shops we would go to where we could tell that they knew our books because the fans like ordered the books, or you know there were some where we could tell that it was like the reader first, right? Like
Okay.
reader
Yeah.
generated enthusiasm. And then there were some shops we went to where we could tell right away that like everyone in here has read our book because this shop told them to, and that was a really good feeling as well, because it's like, oh, these guys have our back. They know that they can make money on our stuff, and like we can work together
Yeah.
and sell these books. So yeah, it was every shop was different, but part of the reason I did it was I remembered being a kid. I grew up in Colorado, and there weren't a ton of it was different, I guess, because I wanted to make comics, and so it was a little more specific to me, but not a ton of comic book people came through. But I remember every one that did come through, and then I would continue to buy their books forever. It's like John Romita Jr. came, J. Scott Campbell lived in Denver and came to Colorado Springs, and Paul Chadwick came, and I would buy. Today, if I was in a comic store and I saw any three of those people doing a new comic, I would be like, "Oh, I'll check that out for sure."
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
No, it's true. My local shop that I go to right down the street in Wilmington, Delaware, Greg Pak's been there a number of times, and like it just having him there, like he was one of the first, creators that I met when I kind of got back into comics and reading them, and then, you know, um and it's true, like it's just that personal connection. And then every time I see he's got a new book out, I'm like, oh,
yeah,
what's what's this? Let's check it out. Let's get the first issue. Let's see if we like it. It's just that connection is invaluable.
and I mean, it's purely anecdotal, but I've heard from a couple of the shops that we stopped at, that like they have seen numbers go up since we were there. Like they were selling X amount of Feral before, and now so many more people have jumped on. So that sort of was the point of it. And what's the return on investment on taking 7 weeks and driving across the whole country? How many more comics would I have to sell for that? I'm not.
Right. Yeah. Haven't done the math on that.
The math
Just
probably doesn't work out, but the plan is just to keep this book up and running, and hope, I'm not going to do it every year. We're not going to drive around the country every fall to promote this book, but it just seemed like at that time when it was the first volume, and it's like really, this is the time. If ever there was a time to get people behind the book, that was the time.
Right. Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. Well, let me know if you're ever in Wilmington, Delaware. I'll reach out to my local shop and put a good word in for you.
What's your shop? Let's shout them out.
It's the comic book shop. It's the comic book shop, Wilmington, Delaware. It's right down the street.
I
They're the
wonder if they're
best.
on their list or not. I don't know, but yeah.
What was just because I love a good, road trip. I don't think I've ever been on one for 7 weeks. I think a month was the longest I ever did about 20 years ago or so. Um, I love all the funky things you can find to eat on the road. Were you guys just like all comics all the time, or is there anything in particular? Any standout sandwiches? Any weird little
Oh yeah,
delicacy?
we would try and have interesting food when we were in places that had interesting food. We did not lose weight on this trip, that's for sure. Uh, but it was interesting, we're driving. It was so much driving food that we would go through like phases. Like when we started out, I was having a lot of those like gummy orange, like those orange slices that are like jelly oranges or whatever.
Yes.
They're not even from a brand. They're just like gas. Every one of them is a gas station brand.
I don't know if the FDA qualifies those as food, but
They have them in orange and they have them in cherry. And I would go through phases where I would have orange sometimes, and then it would go, like a week would go by, and then we'd just be like, grab some more of them oranges. So yeah, we would slide in and out of those. When we were in Jersey, we went to Final Boss Comics, and that shop insisted. Well, not insisted. That's not fair. One of the people at the shop was like, "You got to go try this pizza place. They make a pie that has mustard in the crust, and it's delicious." And we're like, "That sounds gross, but like there's got to be something to it." And not
not for you.
was not for me. It was not. We pictured it being like cooked into the crust, like they're rolling up the crust and it's got mustard somehow infused in it. They just
Yeah.
squirted like French's mustard onto the pie before they put the sauce. It was a weird situation.
Okay.
Definitely different. That was a weird one. But yeah, we had a lot of good stuff. I mean, we had seafood when we were along the coast, and then we had barbecue when we were in Texas and the
Yeah,
South.
nice.
Yeah, and then I'm always looking for like the secret out of the way places. So it was like, we're in Arkansas, and I'm like, we found like this, hot lunch place that's inside a gas station where they just made like good po' boys or what, just like that's the fun of road trips for me, is finding stuff that you're not going to be able to get when you're,
Yeah.
back home. Or
Oh no, I'm the same way. I always go and ask like what's where ask somebody who lives there like what's good to eat, and
yeah,
and then follow it up with no, like not what you tell everybody else, like where do you like to eat,
yeah. Not Bubba Gumps. Like, what's the what's the
Yeah.
real?
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm sure, like, nothing against Applebee's and people that like Applebee's, but yeah, I like to try and find those little, out of the way places, or just local stuff is always fun. So, well, that's good.
I think we did hit all the made. We did like Applebee's and Chili's and all that stuff too, just because we're on the road for so long, and sometimes you're in towns where they just don't have, there's no cool little out of the
Oh
way
yeah,
stuff. They're
yeah.
just like, yeah, it's just the Applebee's is all we got.
I remember one of my road trips I picked. I really like a nice Reuben, and that's what I did. Like whatever, every time we stopped at a diner in a different state, that's what I got, and I just like, I ate Reubens across the country.
Nice. The Reuben tour.
Yeah, yeah, basically. Well, to turn back, to comics, you had mentioned Army of Darkness Forever, and are they re-releasing like Volume 1 and Volume 2 for Army of Darkness Forever, right? Dynamite's
Yeah,
doing that?
the trade for volume 1 is out, and the trade for volume 2 is solicited. I'm not sure with the diamond stuff. I'm not sure what
Yeah.
exactly the outcome of that, well, like how it's coming out, but yeah, it's solicited right now. And yeah, the first volume is all the Justin stuff.
Yeah.
Justin Greenwood did issues 1 through 6, and then Pop Man did issues 7 through 12, and he did a chunk in 13 too to like sort of close it out. So yeah,
Nice.
it'll be 2 volumes, and, I don't know if you finished reading it, but it's like a full story, you know, like, it goes all the way up to the end, and it sort of brings you to a place where you can jump and read any other Army of Darkness comics after that, but if you wanna just have that be, like, the sequel to the movies that you keep and that you read, they can sort of serve as, like, a one you know, like
Yeah.
a single serving, you know, series,
Yep.
which is what we were trying to do because it was the 30th anniversary, just try and make something special that sort of stands on its own. So yeah, um, that wrapped up last year, and and the second volume will be out soon.
Yeah, I mean, I I I think I'm just the last issue behind, but I mean, I really felt it was just a really like when we talked about it, you know, what you and Justin were talking about setting out to do. It really was action packed, a lot of fun. I felt it was really true to like the spirit of it without being, you know, something that felt like a derivative or just like an IP situation. Hey, we have this license, let's just make this thing. Like it really stood out on its own. And
Thank
I just thought it was great.
Yeah, I really love that book. We love making it, and it's weird because it is like this IP like telling somebody like, "Oh, you should check out this this 13 issue Army of Darkness thing that I did." It feels so different than like pitching them on my creator own stuff, or even if it's like a Marvel thing, you know, like you don't think of an Army of Darkness comic as being like one of somebody's better books, but I do think it really sort of stands out. So yeah, I'm glad you dug it. I hope people continue to find it now that it's in trade, and then eventually at some point we're gonna try and do a like a cool hardcover that just looks like the baby Necronomicon, you know, like it's a
Oh,
book, you
nice.
know. That would be
That's pretty cool. And so I know you're starting off our Marvel March because of the thing, which I do want to talk about. But
yeah,
before then, I did want to get into a little bit about Uncanny Valley with Boom
please.
Studios. I
Yeah,
think just so listeners know, um, I think I saw like I think issue 9. Yeah, there, Uncanny Valley right there. For those looking at watching the video. I think issue 9 is solicited to come out April 23rd.
yeah,
And it's you and Dave Wachter.
yeah.
Um, so kind of for any listeners that don't know, kind of tell me like what the premise of Uncanny Valley.
Yeah, it's a coming of age story. It's sort of a road trip adventure story, but it's about a boy who's sort of trying to figure out. He doesn't feel like he fits in. He's trying to figure out what his place is in the world. He's got a single mom, and he doesn't know much about where he's from or his family. And in the first issue, we meet, and he meets for the first time his grandpa, who's a actual cartoon character. And so this kid finds out that the reason that he feels like he doesn't fit in is because he like actually is part cartoon. Like he does something's a little bit off. And so it's sort of like Percy Jackson, but with you know, Looney Tunes instead of Greek gods, you know.
Yeah, that's actually funny. My daughter, my oldest, who's 12, went through all the Rick Riordan, Percy Jackson
Yeah.
stuff. She's asked me to she asked me to read it, which is I was happy to do, because, every time I recommend something to her, she has no interest in it, but I thought, "Oh, well, she's doing that to me, and I'm not gonna say, like, 'You won't read this.'" I
Yeah.
said, "Oh, no, I'll do it." So I just finished the audiobook of, the 3rd Percy Jackson, I think, the Titan's Curse, so
Yeah.
I'm well up on the Percy Jackson reference. I feel like with Uncanny Valley, you're kind of tiptoeing around maybe or playing in all these different things that I kind of like really like, you know, because instantly I think of kind of like a Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which
Hmm.
is just one of my favorite movies. Absolutely
Same.
love it. And I always kind of enjoy when you have a mix of I know it's this is not a movie, it's not live action, but when you have like reality meeting the kind of like cartoon world, and, a lot of the characters you have in there, it feels like you're kinda getting close to things we know, but it's really creating your own stuff, like, it's really a nice job. I mean, both in the writing and in the artwork to feel like we know what these things are, but they're wholly their own creation. And yeah, the idea we usually see these two things mixing, but I can't think of anything quite like this where it's not just the character has discovered this
Yeah.
cartoon world. It's like, oh, he's kind of like a real part of it. I think it's wild.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I loved Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and like part of the reason why this story like felt so important to me when I sort of came up with it, was when I saw Who Framed Roger Rabbit. I was just obsessed with that combination of live action and animation, and I just thought, like, after I saw it, I was just like, okay, well, that's just how movies will be now. Like every movie can have cartoon characters, and like, and then when it rarely happened, if ever, I was just like, well, this, how come nobody's, Space Jam had cartoons and real people together, but I didn't really care about sports that much. So I was like, oh, this is okay. But then it would be like, Cool World a little bit, and it would just sort of happen here and there.
Yeah.
But I was just such a sucker for it that, like, even in commercials or whatever, I would just be like, it's they're doing it. So having this idea, and it sort of came from, um, I was rereading Planetary, and the idea of this world where all the sort of like pulp stuff and sci-fi stuff that we read and that like we nerd out about actually exists in this sort of in our world, but it's just sort of like kept under the surface. Um, I thought, like, that's what if that was cartoons, and what if the history of cartoons sort of like mirrored our own history, and what if, you know, if we went back to prehistoric times, it would be like Flintstones and Gertie the dinosaur, and
Right.
and so just like thinking about that really got me going. But then the part that where I really locked in, where I was like, oh, I like this, is what if it's a story about a family, and it's a story about a single mom and her son, and all they have is each other, and then her father shows back up in the picture, and they're estranged for some reason, and like just being able to sort of like pull that apart and play with that, and then do that with a cartoon. I thought like that felt really, for like fertile ground to mess with. And then when Dave Wachter agreed to do it, and he's a buddy of mine. We'd worked together probably 20 years ago on like one of both of our first books, like a one shot thing, and we sort of had led parallel careers to a certain extent. Like we had the same editor. The guy that hired me to draw My Little Pony for years was the same guy that hired Dave to draw Ninja Turtles for years.
Okay.
And so he had sort of gone that direction. Then he was starting to do Marvel stuff when I was starting to do Image stuff, and then this sort of thing. I had talked to him about it years before Boom was in the picture or anything, where I said I kind of have this idea where it's real people and cartoons, and would you be interested in just drawing the real people part, and then we'd get like a cartoony artist to do the other stuff? And he was like, you want me to do this project and just draw the boring parts? That sounds that sounds awful. I don't want to do that at all. And then when I was talking to Boom about this, I was like, so can we get two people to do it, or how do we do? And they were like, two people sounds tough. And I said, well, let me ask Dave if he can just do both. And so I asked him, and he was like, yeah, of course, I would love to. And then we started working on it. He started drawing it, and I was like, this is incredible. I didn't know you could draw cartoons like this. And he was like, yeah, I didn't know either. I was bluffing.
Well, I guess it paid off,
Yeah.
you know? You know, thinking about these things that we're talking about with Stray Dogs, with Feral, and Uncanny Valley, in terms of your writing, different writers have different strengths, different either stories that they're attracted to, or stories they want to tell. I mean, you do sincerity, almost a kind of like earnestness very well, but in these worlds where it's so easy to, because of the premise or even the artwork, it's so easy to kind of take it into more like hyperbole, or maybe get too saccharine with it, or whatever it might be. Like, is that something you think about consciously when you're writing it? Is it something that comes natural to you, something that you've developed, or do you just reject my comment?
No, like this sort of. I'm trying to think of. I'm trying to think of a word that's not milieu, but like this cartoony but sincere, or like cartoons played for real, um, like vein that I've been working in. I feel like I have a lot to say about it, and I think a lot of it comes from being like drawing like that for my whole life. Like I drew My Little Pony comics for 10 years. I drew Star Wars Adventures comics and Rick and Morty. Like I'm a cartoon artist. And I can draw in a more realistic style. Like Local Man is not cartoony, but if you have me sit down and just start sketching and doodling, like that's how I draw. And and working in that part of comics for as long as I did, there's a bit of, I don't want to say it's like a chip on my shoulder, but it is where you want, like, people use cartoony as like a pejorative, right? They'd say like they'll just be like, that artist is a little cartoony. I can't really, get into it, or what, like it's you feel like you're sort of um less than sometimes. And so I'm always trying to like show what you can actually do with this that is more than, where it's like
Sure.
if
Oh,
if
yeah.
if Stray Dogs, or if Feral, or if like if Uncanny Valley is just about a boy and a regular old man who's his grandpa, like it doesn't hit as hard as when you can have these expressive characters, and you know these dogs and cats that you can identify with because they're anthropomorphized, where you can sort of like you put emotion onto them, and you put like real sort of like pathos, and they've got their own stuff going, interpersonal stuff going on. But you care more because they're drawn this way. It's like the Scott McCloud understanding comics thing, right? Where you can identify more with a smiley face than you can with like a very rendered drawing of a person, because the more graphic it is and the more simplistic it is, the easier it is to put yourself into that container, right? For
Right.
whatever.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I guess I don't know if that's a good answer to your question, but it is sort of, it's something that I'm definitely conscious of, and something that I have to sort of check the levels on sometimes, because I feel like I don't have, and my ex-wife would probably tell you the same thing. Like I don't have the same uh emotional, like I don't have a lot of feelings, and
Okay.
so or at least like outwardly, like inside I have a lot going on, but like
Yeah,
outwardly.
I'm surprised at the person that I've read,
Yeah,
quite
yeah,
a
yeah.
bit of your work, to say, like,
Well, I
doesn't have
can
feelings. It's just you
I put
express them differently, Tony. Is that
exactly.
what you're saying?
I put them into the work, and sometimes, like, watching the reaction of people, like, I'll watch reviews of the book sometimes, or I'll talk to people in comic shops, and I'll think I'm doing, like, a 7, and then I see these people's faces, and I'm like, "Oh, shit, I did, like, a 12," like, I need to we're trying to do this for the long run. I'm not trying to put people through this, like, at that level for that time. So I'm always
Okay.
thinking about it, and I'm always thinking about how, because these animals are so cute, or because the cartoon characters around Uncanny Valley are so relatable and cute, that you can't hit them as hard as you could. I mean, you don't wanna hit any dogs in any media, but I'm saying, like, you can't put them through as much as you could put, like, a realistically drawn character, or like a superhero, or whatever, because people do really care about, they're looking at these characters and they're seeing their cats or their dogs, or
Sure.
so yeah, it is a lot of sort of like like tuning the dial and making sure that you're not doing too much, but also being like holding that in your back pocket, and being like that you never know when a page turn could come, and we do the most, like where it just goes haywire.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot. I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense. And well, I mean, I'm glad. Maybe you're not glad in terms of being able to keep you're not express your feelings except through your work, but I think, uh, you know, your work, certainly doesn't, suffer for it. I mean, I think it's you've turned in so I mean, just look at the stuff, at least in terms of the past 2 years that you've had out, and then to kinda turn to The Thing, coming out in May, um, with Justin Mason.
Yeah.
So I you're gonna be the first of, like, the Marvel March episodes for this, but I've already interviewed, um, Ryan North,
Oh, cool.
and I I said this a lot on the podcast. The listeners are probably tired of hearing it, but I have not ever read a lot of Marvel comics. No reason, just never got around to
You're
it.
a DC guy, or what was
Yeah,
your?
I was always more of a DC guy, and then when I got back into comics, it was DC, and then a lot of indie stuff, and I just
Yeah.
never kind of made my way through the Marvel universe. When I was a kid, I collected the Marvel trading cards. I still have a complete set, I think, of 92
Incredible.
somewhere in my room. I almost have a full set of 91, but
You got
I
those
was
Jim Lee
missing a
X-Men
few.
cards?
What?
You got the Jim Lee X-Men cards?
I don't think I have those, but
Those are the cards, Jimmy. That's what you
It
gotta
those
get.
are, I know. Those are, but I recently rediscovered in my I say recently, a few years ago in my basement, I rediscovered an old, I think it was a Return of the Jedi lunchbox, and I
You
opened it
know?
up, and it was just filled with like with with not sports cards because I was an indoor kid. It was Marvel. So this was been late 80s, early 90s because it was Marvel, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle cards,
The movie?
I think so,
Yeah.
and the cartoons, Gremlins, Star Wars, Indiana Jones, Alf cards, uh, some Terminator 2 cards. Yeah, it was a real an A-Team. It
Yeah.
was a real hodgepodge of, of a real treasure trove of nerdy things.
Yeah.
But my point was, I haven't read a lot of Marvel. The first Fantastic Four comic I ever read was I read volume 1 of, that Ryan North
Oh, wow.
has written, in preparation for the interview, and I loved it, and absolutely loved The Thing, and I mean, from, just knowing comics, I was familiar with the character. I think I saw a couple of the Fantastic Four movies, but I'd never really, like, read The Thing or Ben Grimm on the page, and I just really loved, um, that volume 1, and I can't wait to read the rest of it. It's waiting for me on, I think, on my Hoopla. So I was excited to see that you were kind of going to be able to do, or going to do your take on The Thing with this 5-issue limited series. And I understand it's a little different because it's like, I mean, everything I've read about it, it seems like it's, The Thing against the Marvel universe. So kind of like, is that what we're,
Yes,
what we
sorta.
get?
It's definitely a street level story. It's not cosmic like the Fantastic Four stuff. It's sort of more Yancey Street, like the Thing, like he's just banging around uh Manhattan and um getting into trouble out there. It's basically, I was pitching stories to the editor. The editor had reached out and asked me to pitch Thing stories, and so I pitched them a few, and he gave me sort of like hints, like here's what they like for the Thing, or here's what CB likes for superhero stories. Here's what he doesn't like, and so I was just sort of like trying to craft a story that was like that would do the stuff that I like about the Thing, but also sort of like fit within those, like uh, uh, I didn't want to work extra. I didn't want to do like, well, I know you hate this, but what about if it was like this? So I just was like,
Yeah.
I'll do what they like. And one of the things they said that they like is like it's easy to get through stuff. And this is a tip for if you're
Yeah.
out there and you're aspiring.
For anyone pitching.
Yeah, if you're 44 minutes into this, here's your tip. Uh, Marvel likes stuff that has like a lot of fighting and a lot of like superhero action and stuff like that. Like especially um, in a thing like this where they want it to be like a standalone. Um, there's no way to just say something's evergreen without it coming out, but like aim for it to be something that somebody can just pick up and read, whether it's today or whether it's 20 years from now or 5 years from now or whatever. And so I was thought about what I liked about the Thing, and before Wolverine, the Thing was like the guy at Marvel. Like, he's the guy everybody loved. He's a bruiser. He would show up and he sort of had that sort of like gruff, lovable. He's like your uncle's buddy that tells you dirty jokes, or
Yeah.
like the non-threatening version of that.
Yeah, whatever the not creepy, version of that
Yeah.
is.
Um, but
And he
yeah,
also
it's
has the
just
more mature, like I have seen some of the, when he's in this coat and the hat, like they do that kind of almost
yeah,
noir Ben
yeah, it's
Grimm.
Humphrey Bogart.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I just figured out a story where we could have Ben Grimm up book where he teamed up with other heroes and fought supervillains every month, and
Right.
and he's been in thousands of issues of the Fantastic Four, so he's fought so many people. So I just sort of thought, I went and looked through all my official handbooks, and I flipped through like all my favorite Fantastic Four stuff, and I just thought about like who would it be fun to see the Thing fight. And also, they sort of set it in, to them, I'm probably giving away too much, but to them, um, evergreen Fantastic Four period is, they sort of think about it as like this amorphous John Byrne Fantastic Four time.
Okay.
So like not as far back as like the 60s Kirby and Stan Lee stuff, but like late 70s, early
Late
80s.
70s, early 80s, yeah.
Um, and so that's sort of like the time that we put it in. When I think about that, I think about like, all right, well, what else is going on at that time in Marvel? It's like that's the golden era of Marvel. It's like Simonson Thor time, and it's John Byrne X-Men time, and it's Frank Miller Daredevil time, and all of those stories, they always sort of have their villains um, siloed into, that's a Spider-Man villain, or that's an X-Men villain, or so I just thought about like, well, let's figure out a story where that doesn't matter, and nobody, you won't know who's coming on the next page. Anybody can come through, and just the Thing can have to clobber them. Uh, and so that's sort of what we figured out. But then, like I try to do in my other stuff, also figure out a way to give it heart, and to tell you something new about Ben, and sort of um, make you think of, like, my favorite comics are the ones, superhero comics specifically, are the ones where you read them and then they tell you something that makes you think about it every time it happens in another comic. Like, if we can do something here with, like, we're specifically, like, we've got a clobbering time bit where if I can, if this breaks through, and if it's, if enough people read it, or even if nobody reads it, if one person reads it and then they read another Fantastic Four comic, a month later, they'll, like, hopefully clobbering time means something a little bit different to them.
Okay.
That's the sort of lofty, the hope for it. And I'm not saying a lot about the plot of it, but it is just, a street level Thing story. He gets somebody from his old, from before he was a Rocky monster, from when he was growing up, from Yancey Street, comes around, and he sort of gets wrapped up into a mystery with that person, and it's just them sort of like making their way across Manhattan, going to different areas and running into different supervillains, and then at a certain point, like, all the supervillains in the Marvel universe are sort of out to get the Thing. So that's sort of the pitch. And like you said, Justin Mason's drawing it. It was originally going to be drawn by Leonard Kirk, and then he ran into some health trouble, but Justin took over, and then the first issue actually drew over Leonard's layouts. So it was real interesting to watch that. And now he's drawing the second issue, and sort of seeing how, like, it's fascinating to me as somebody who also draws comics, to watch, how somebody works over somebody else's layouts, and what their own layouts look like. It's just it's been really fun to watch, especially somebody so talented and energetic. as Justin. He's just super talented, and he has like great thing action punches, and Leonard as well. Like Leonard just could draw what looked like just perfect thing poses, and like he would draw a punch and you're just like, that's what the thing looks like when he punches. Incredible. Like it's definitely different than uh when I'm making, feral or stray dogs or local man, or I'm so involved in those like on feral and stray dogs. I do thumbnails, and local man I draw half of it myself, and so it's like there's not a lot of it that shows up in my inbox, and I get to go like, oh, this is a surprise. Seeley
Right.
would send in his pages of local man. That would be nice, like that. Or when Dave sends in Uncanny Valley pages, I get that same sort of charge. But this is a whole, I mean, these are superhero artists, it's a whole different thing. Like they turn in pages and I'm just like, son of a gun, this guy just sent me a superhero comic that I wrote. It's pretty cool.
Oh, well, I'm excited for it, especially I can't get enough of the thing right now. I put something on Blue Sky, like, let me know your favorite, what other thing story should I read? So I have like some homework ahead of me, but
Dan Slott thing series from the early aughts is real good. I bet you dig it.
yeah. Somebody mentioned that. Somebody else whose opinion I trust told me to try and track down. It was very specific. It was the Marvel 2-in-1, the Thing, like number 7. So,
Okay.
I uh, so that
That's
was
when you know it's gonna be good, when
yeah.
they've been able to zero in on that one.
Right.
Oh, I'm gonna go read that tonight.
Yeah. So I
I don't
gotta go
even know who
track
recommended it.
yeah,
Um,
I gotta go track down Marvel 2-in-1, the Thing, that the Thing was in.
well,
Um,
hopefully we're
so,
making
yeah.
one of those with this series. I really am trying to. I mean, the other thing about it is, like, in writing it, like, at first I was just like, "Why are they asking me to write the thing?" But I'm happily, I'm not gonna say no. But then when I'm writing it, I was like, "Oh, right." Uh, like, I'm writing it, and he talks not exactly like me, but close enough that I'm like, "Oh, okay, I get it." And then also, he just sort of is like, I don't have, great self-esteem, Like, I think anybody that's ever felt like a little bit like they don't like the way their body is, or they don't, like, the Thing is all that, but he also, the same way that I feel like I do, he just sort of like cramps all that inside and gets up and
Right.
still goes out and does what he's supposed to do, and still can, like, it isn't like he, he's not always a pleasure, but he does his best to always come through for people. And that's sort of
Yeah.
like the heart of the Thing, is that like he's always there for his friends, and has been for, especially for his family, but he's also got all this inner turmoil stuff that because he thinks he looks like a monster. Which I'm not
Yeah.
that bad, but I think everybody's got something about themselves that they don't like.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think what I really liked, like in reading, Ryan North had written, um, is it's someone that it feels like could be, very easily feel like less than when the rest of your team, is who they are,
Yeah.
is Johnny and Sue and Reed. Um, And even though he has all this internal stuff going on about himself or how he looks, there's this like real kind of let's, you know, let's figure this out. Let's get it done. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do my part.
Yeah.
And yeah, and he's I quickly risen to the top of my favorite superhero
Yeah,
characters
he's great.
in that volume. So I'm excited for this, especially to see you write it, Justin Mason. Wish Leonard Kirk a speedy, recovery for
Yeah, same.
whatever health issues he's having. But yeah, Justin Mason, who just is coming off the Sentinels, which I thought was really good with Alex Packnadell. So very excited to see what he does with it. And yeah, I think that'll be out May 21st. But I'm going to add it to my pull list. So listeners, I suggest you do the same. And yeah, Tony, thank you so much. I didn't want to keep you this long. I know we both had a long day today. So, but I really appreciate it. Uh, uh, before we go, I always got to shout out my brother Bobby, the Cryptic Creator Corner's #1 most dedicated fan. I think Bobby has collected all the um I think the variant cover for Army of Darkness Forever. He's gotten every issue, so he's very happy with that. He absolutely loves it. But yeah, so listeners, if you haven't read Stray Dogs, you got to start there. You can get caught up on Feral. Local Man, I know I've at least 2 volumes are out in trade now.
3.
Uh, all 3 are out
Mhm.
now? Okay. All 3 are out. Local Man, you're working on that one with Tim Seeley.
Yeah.
It's absolutely fantastic.
Thank you.
As we talked about, Army of Darkness Forever, Uncanny Valley by Boom Studios. Yeah, and look for the Thing, and I'll put links in the show notes to your website and social media. But Tony, thank you so much. And if you're ever in and around Delaware and want to sign some comics, you just let me know.
Absolutely.
Okay.
You bet. Thanks for having me on again. It's great catching up.
All right. Thank you, listeners. Thank you, Tony. And I will see you next time.